I built my dream cabin in the mountains, but the HOA slapped me with a $10,000 fine for a fence they didn't approve. So I fought back with a cease and desist, signed by the governor himself. Stick around to see how this petty HOA drama turned into a legal showdown that shook the entire neighborhood. If you love wild HOA stories, property disputes, and epic comebacks, smash that like button, hit subscribe, and ring the bell so you don't miss part 2 of this 4-part saga. Let's dive into the chaos. The crisp mountain air of Pinewood Ridge carried the scent of cedar and freedom, or so I thought when I first purchased the plot of land nestled in the heart of the Blue Ridge Mountains. It was a half-acre slice of paradise, surrounded by towering pines and a babbling creek, the perfect spot for the cabin I'd spent years dreaming about. After months of planning, permits, and construction, the cabin stood proud. A cozy 2-story retreat with cedar siding, a wraparound porch, and a small garden framed by a rustic wooden fence. It was everything I'd envisioned, a sanctuary from the chaos of city life. But the Pinewood Ridge Homeowners Association had other plans. They didn't see a dream home. They saw a violation. The trouble started with a single letter, slipped into my mailbox on a chilly October morning. It was a notice from the HOA, typed in cold bureaucratic font claiming my fence was non-compliant with their aesthetic guidelines. The fine? A staggering $10,000 plus a demand to tear it down within 30 days or face daily penalties. My heart sank as I read the letter, the words blurring through a haze of disbelief. The fence was sturdy, unobtrusive, and matched the cabin's rustic charm perfectly. I'd even checked the county regulations before building it, ensuring every post and plank was legal. But the HOA, an unelected council of busybodies led by a woman named Marjorie Henshaw, didn't care about county rules. They had their own playbook, a 47-page manual of restrictions that seemed to exist solely to make life miserable. I wasn't one to back down, though. Years of navigating corporate red tape had taught me how to handle petty tyrants, and I wasn't about to let Marjorie and her clipboard-wielding minions ruin my dream. I pored over the HOA's covenants, searching for loopholes. The document was a labyrinth of jargon, but I noticed something peculiar. The guidelines for fences were vague, mentioning only aesthetic harmony, without specifying measurements or materials. It was a gray area, and I intended to exploit it. I drafted a polite but firm letter, citing the lack of clarity in their rules and requesting a hearing. The response was swift and venomous. Marjorie herself emailed me, her tone dripping with condescension, informing me that the board's decision was final and that community standards must be upheld. She even had the audacity to suggest my fence was lowering property values. That was rich, considering my cabin was one of the few custom-built homes in a neighborhood of cookie-cutter McMansions. Frustration simmered, but I kept my cool. I contacted a local attorney, a grizzled man named Tom who specialized in property disputes. Tom had a reputation for taking on HOAs and winning, and after reviewing my case, he grinned like a fox in a henhouse. The HOA's vague rules were their Achilles heel, he said, and we could fight this without paying a dime of their ridiculous fine. We filed an appeal with the HOA board, demanding they retract the fine and provide evidence of the violation. The hearing was scheduled for the following month, giving me time to prepare. I spent evenings digging through public records, uncovering every permit and regulation tied to my property. The more I learned, the more confident I grew that the HOA was overstepping. My fence was well within county guidelines, and the land itself had a unique history. It was once part of a protected easement, a detail the HOA seemed to have overlooked. As the hearing approached, I noticed subtle acts of intimidation. My mailbox was stuffed with anonymous notes, warning me to play nice or face consequences. One morning, I found a small pile of gravel dumped in my driveway, a petty act that reeked of Marjorie's influence. She was the queen bee of Pinewood Ridge, a retired realtor with a perm and a penchant for power trips. Neighbors whispered about her reign of terror, stories of fines for unapproved mailboxes, lawn ornaments, and even excessive holiday lights. I wasn't intimidated, though. If Marjorie wanted a fight, I'd give her one. The hearing was held in the community center, a sterile room with fluorescent lights and folding chairs. The board sat at a long table, Marjorie at the center like a judge presiding over a kangaroo court. I presented my case calmly, armed with documents, photos, and Tom's legal analysis. The board barely listened, their eyes glazed with disinterest. Marjorie, however, stared daggers. Her lips pursed as if she'd swallowed a lemon, When I finished, she leaned forward, her voice sharp as she declared the fine upheld. No explanation, no discussion, just a verdict. That night I sat on my porch staring at the offending fence. The HOA thought they'd won, but they didn't know who they were dealing with. I wasn't just a homeowner. I had connections, ones that reached far beyond Pinewood Ridge. My cousin worked in the governor's office, and I'd done a favor for her boss years ago during a campaign. It was time to call in that favor. I spent the next week drafting a cease and desist letter, not just to the HOA, but to Marjorie personally. Tom helped polish it, ensuring every word was airtight. The letter cited the HOA's overreach, the vague covenants, and the easement history, demanding they drop the fine and halt all enforcement actions. The kicker? I sent a copy to my cousin, who passed it to the governor's legal team. To my surprise, they took an interest. Apparently, HOAs were a growing problem statewide, and my case was a perfect example of their abuse. Days later, I received a package from the governor's office. Inside was my cease and desist, now bearing an official state seal and a signature from the governor himself. It was a power move, one that would make Marjorie's head spin. I mailed the letter to the HOA, certified, and waited. The fallout was imminent, but for now I sat back, sipped my coffee, and let the mountain air calm my nerves. The battle was far from over, but I had a trump card, and I was ready to play it. The certified letter landed like a grenade in the HOA's lap, and the explosion was glorious. For days there was silence, no emails, no notices, no passive-aggressive notes in my mailbox. I knew Marjorie was scrambling, probably huddled with her board trying to figure out how a simple fence dispute had escalated to involve the governor's office. The cease and desist wasn't just a letter, it was a warning shot. A signal that I wasn't some pushover they could bully with fines and threats. But I wasn't naive. Marjorie wasn't the type to back down, and I braced for her counterattack. Sure enough, a week later, a new notice arrived, this time accusing me of unauthorized modifications to my property's landscaping. The HOA claimed my garden, a small patch of wildflowers and herbs, violated their rules on excessive vegetation. The fine was another $5,000, and they demanded I remove the garden within 14 days. It was a blatant retaliation, a desperate attempt to reassert control. I could almost picture Marjorie's smug grin as she signed off on the notice. But she'd underestimated me again. I took the new notice to Tom, who laughed so hard he nearly spilled his coffee. The HOA's rules on landscaping were even vaguer than their fence guidelines, and the easement on my property gave me extra leeway for natural plantings. We drafted a second cease and desist, this time citing harassment and abuse of power. I also reached out to my cousin, who confirmed the governor's office was now monitoring Pinewood Ridge's HOA for potential overreach. The state had received dozens of complaints about HOAs across the region, and my case was gaining traction as a potential test for reform. Armed with this knowledge, I decided to take the fight public. I created a blog, Pinewood Ridge Rebellion, detailing every step of my battle with the HOA. I posted scans of their notices, my responses, and the governor's signed letter, careful to redact personal details. The blog spread like wildfire on social media, especially among local homeowners fed up with Marjorie's tyranny. Neighbors I'd never met started emailing me their own HOA horror stories, fines for faded shutters, penalties for parking in their own driveways, even a case where Marjorie tried to ban a family's dog for excessive barking. The blog became a rallying point, and soon, a small group of residents formed a coalition to challenge the HOA's authority. We held secret meetings at my cabin, strategizing over coffee and homemade scones. The coalition uncovered a gold mine. The HOA's elections were rigged, with Marjorie handpicking board members to ensure her control. We filed a formal complaint with the state's real estate division, citing election fraud and mismanagement. The governor's office took notice, and whispers of an investigation began to circulate. Marjorie, sensing the tide turning, doubled down. She sent a letter to every homeowner, claiming I was a disruptive influence threatening the community's harmony. She even tried to organize a vote to amend the covenants, tightening the rules to retroactively justify her fines. But her plan backfired. The blog had emboldened residents, and at the community meeting, dozens showed up to oppose her. For the first time, Marjorie looked rattled, her usual composure cracking as residents questioned her authority. I sat in the back watching the chaos unfold, knowing the governor's letter was still my ace in the hole. The meeting ended with no vote passed, and Marjorie stormed out, her face red with fury. That night, I checked my blog's analytics. Thousands of views, hundreds of comments, and messages from lawyers offering pro bono help. The fight was bigger than my fence now. It was about dismantling a system that let petty dictators like Marjorie rule with impunity. But the war wasn't won yet. Marjorie was down but not out, and I knew she'd come for me again. The next move was hers, and I was ready to counter it. If this HOA saga has you hooked, smash that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next 2 chapters. Drop a comment with your own HOA horror stories. We want to hear them. Stay tuned for part 3, where things get even wilder.